Okay. All right. Well, I mean, this is probably one of the most entertaining podcasts we've ever done.
Yeah.
His ability to bring it up and bring it back down, as far as like go off into it honestly, it reminded me a lot of me.
There's a lot of passion behind the rage.
Dude, it was, I think that was, you know what? It was endearing.
Yeah.
I found this to be an endearing conversation, which might say more about us than the conversation. But like, yeah, he gives a shit about something that's worth giving a shit about. Yeah. Sorry, for those of you just joining us, today's episode is with Broderick Chavez. If you're in the industry, you likely know Broderick Chavez's name. If you've been in the industry for a long time, you've probably known his name. He's coming to the forefront of recent years. He is the industry's foremost expert on anabolic and androgenic performance enhancing drug, and really drug use in general. Background in biology. He's, passionate is a word that comes to mind.
Definitely.
One of like, he would be the best and worst dinner guest, depending on your temperament, because he doesn't pull any punches.
Yeah.
But he comes from a good place.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that was a really endearing thing in going through this was, like we went off on some crazy tangents. We tried to contextualize performance enhancing drugs in sports, in bodybuilding. We talked a little bit about the current deaths in bodybuilding, the recent deaths in bodybuilding. But every time the storm cleared, you're like, this guy cares a lot about what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. So I had a blast. We're actually, this is the Wednesday release. He is going to be in Vegas June 4th. And if you guys like what you hear, or even just, he's so fucking entertaining that, that's worth the price of admission just there. Yeah. So if you're in the Vegas, really, if you're anywhere and you want to learn more about this, Broads is the guy. He's really been the guy behind the scenes. He used the word subterranean, and that sort of described his presence in the industry. Like, he's been in the war room with top 10 Olympic athletes, pro athletes, UFC, and so on. Super interesting dude. Cares a lot. Very well spoken.
Yeah, very informative.
Yeah, he was one of the few guests where it's like, I need to try and flex the linguistic muscle. Like, the wordplay was super interesting.
Yeah.
He's big stickler on language, which we love. Cannot say enough good things. We actually discussed after the podcast, we're having him back on, which was great because he, from the gate and interspersed throughout the episode, expressed his disdain for the public eye and being a part of the social discourse. But he was nice enough at the end to express his sentiment towards the podcast. We asked him if he'd come back on. So look, mid-July-ish, we're going to have him back on for another podcast talking about training, and maybe even another one, as he alluded to, talking about psyche and psychology. Super interesting dude, Broderick Chavez. Hope you guys enjoy the episode. Real quick, Prescript Level 1.
Yep.
This is going to close. You got like 5 days before this is up. Semester starts early June, so it'll start next week. If you have any questions, shoot us an email at info@pre-script.com. DM the Prescript page on Instagram. As well, for some of those, or for some of you who aren't as inclined to jump full steam ahead, head first into a, what is an intense 16-week course, Prescript Collective.
Yeah.
Prescript Collective has been a product that we've had, a service that we've had, a community that we've had going now since January. It only gets more valuable. It's a continuing education product where we host bi-monthly lectures, meaning twice a month we get lectures from industry experts on various topics, from sports nutrition to strength and conditioning to bodybuilding, you name it. Plus the community aspect, the literature review component, a lot of stuff jammed into that. Mm-hmm. And for $35 a month, you can't really go wrong, even just for the networking through the community, right?
Aspect.
Yeah. So guys, L1 registration live, Prescript Collective. If you sign up for the level 1, you actually get the collective for free. So you're going to get the collective for free for the duration of the course. So a little value add. Course comes with the manual. We have 7 labs a week. This is by far the most interactive, most community-driven, most, I'm just going to say it, most valuable course on functional anatomy, applied biomechanics. So guys, if you've been thinking about it, do sign up. Time's running out on that. If not, we do have the collective product, which will give you a taste of all of the different courses that we have. And if you're in the Vegas area, Broderick Chavez, June 4th, check it out. Guys, do enjoy the episode. And yeah, that's it for today. Lundy, hit it.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
I don't know if you know my backstory, but I was fucking cripplingly hurt in 2013. And that's when I couldn't do a lot of the other stuff I was doing for income, so I kind of had to lean into this full time. I was literally wheelchair bound, so I kind of had to. So that, is pretty much what precipitated the shift and forced me to have a little bit of a public persona.
But one of the things I really wanted to dig in today is you're kind of doing the Lord's work out here, man. Like, it's a fucking elephant graveyard when it comes to performance enhancing drugs and health in the industry. Like, the last couple of years has just been, I remember for about 3 or 4 weeks, the Generation Iron Instagram page, which you can have your own opinions on that. It was bodybuilding obituary. It was literally, this girl's dead, this girl's dead, this guy's dead, this girl's dead. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So like, silver linings, I'm sure wheelchairs are not the best, but man, if it pushed you into helping these kids out, like, there's no better time for it than now, which seems crazy because I always get two things from old school bodybuilders. I get, these kids take too many drugs. And then on the flip side, I also get, the drugs you get aren't real. And it's like, well, hold on. Yeah. If the drugs aren't real and we're taking too much of them, which one is it?
Yeah, neither of those are even remotely accurate. I mean, if you go back and look at dosages from the mid 70s, some of it's more appalling than what you see today.
Yeah.
I'm not even exaggerating. Steve Mihalich did shit that, would have made anybody today fucking blush.
What piqued your interest in this? Like, what was the initial, like, oh, okay, like this biochemistry, this pharmacology, what was it originally that's like, okay, this is cool?
Well, honestly, and again, I hate talking about this kind of shit, especially on camera, but real quick, it's not that way. I never, ever had a plan B. There was no, like, from age, and I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to say 6 or 7. This is what I was going to do. It was not a question. It was not a hesitation. It was not a hiccup. Like, you could like sneak up on me and quiz me. Like, what are you going to do? I'm like, somehow I'm going to lift weights and make money doing that. Like, it was not a question. So every single, book I read, every single person I talked to, every single place I went was somehow predicated on eking out a little more knowledge about this to be able to do this.
And how did that, or when did that start to transition into a career? You mentioned in 2013 it was the shift, but clearly if you must have had a foothold in this prior to that incident.
I did, but it was much different. It was very much subterranean. I was kind of the fixer behind the scenes, and so and so would call and I would fly to them. They would pay me a lot of money. I would fix whatever the fuck dumb shit they did, and then go about my business and compete in powerlifting here and there when I felt like it. The need for like a member site and kind of doing more like actual kind of official out of where the public knew what I was doing. I mean, again, I don't like to say these sort of things even now, but I mean, there's a number of guys that took top 10 positions at the Olympia that would not have done so had I not come and hid their diuretics and fucking gotten them through the final week.
Which, yeah, so you say fixer, like, what are the problems that you run into? Like, and maybe how have they evolved? Like, from back in the day where subterranean is such a great word, when it was more subterranean, now that it's much more, and the outward facing in the open, what are the problems, and have those problems that you fix, have they changed or evolved?
Insofar as drugs have a bit of fashion, and also, we're dealing with drugs that, go in and out of production. There are drugs, that were very, very popular 30 years ago that no one's ever heard of now, and vice versa. 30 years ago, guys were hurting themselves with cytidine, aminoglutathiamine. Now you can't find anybody that uses that, but 2 or 3 guys that you saw keel over at the Olympia, literally that was what did that. So it's kind of there's a fashion to drug use, so you can't really put your finger on, it's insulin, it's diuretics, it's because it's always something different. Because I don't understand what drives fashion, but it's a thing.
Do you have like a no touch list, like a hard line? Because I've been around, I've been in the room the day before, and I've seen all the 30 gauge darts and all the pills and all that, and I don't ask questions. I could make assumptions, but like, is there things that you're like, absolutely not? There's no reason, or there's another drug that can do what you want this drug to do better? Like, do you like a hard list of no's?
No, I don't, but I have a hard list of priorities.
Okay.
Insofar that, there's that thing that's the absolute bottom of the list. You're like, all right, that is there's nothing else. That's, but it's not so much like it's a hard line for me. It's just like, if option A, B, C, D, and E didn't work, like, fuck, I guess we're going to F. Like, that's more how I think about it. I don't ever feel like I have the moral superiority to tell someone don't ever do that. Like, how the fuck could I say that?
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you what a bad idea it is, but I'm not going to tell you not to do it.
Now, do you have some perennial contenders at the bottom of that list, or like the worst ideas?
Oh, I mean, most people's diuretic protocol is tantamount to, fucking death. Aminoglutathiamine, cytidines are pretty bad idea. DNP's very effective, but far more awful than people give it credit. Most people do this. Like, I'm a tough guy, I can do anything, and then 2 hours into DNP therapy, they're like, no, they're laying on the ground gasping like a fucking carp.
Can you explain that one? Because that's the fertilizer one, right? Excuse my ignorance, but I'm just a content bystander.
It's actually used commercially today. It's used commercially as a solvent to clean machine parts and an insecticide. Wow. But it does have chemical similarities to fertilizer. Yes.
Now, what use would that have inside the human body?
Well, it's poison. It doesn't officially. You have to ask those questions very carefully. The difference between what use would it have and how do athletes use it are two. I'm not trying to be a dick, but they're slightly different questions.
Okay, so maybe let's lean into the second question, because that one, I've been able to smell that one.
Yeah, oh, your skin turns orange. You smell like ass,
dude. What the hell? I had a couple patients.
And I'll tell you a really funny little tip. I don't want to say too much because I'll throw him under the bus. But good friend of mine works. He was in the military, worked in nuke subs, parlayed that into a job working at a nuclear power plant. Good dude, good job, recreational bodybuilder. Decided to take DNP to prep for one of his contests, and a few weeks into his DNP therapy, which by the way is monumental. Most people can't do it a few days. A few weeks is way impressive. He walks into work, walks through the little turnstile thing, and next thing you know, he's pinned to the ground at gunpoint because the sheer chemical coming out of his skin set off the dynamite detectors, the bomb detectors.
Oh shit!
Because it's a nitrogen-based compound that is very, fertilizer, all those sorts of things will trip that mechanism. So just little pro tip for you: don't get fucking carried away, folks.
Because that would, I mean, I've been told, actually, Mark told us this way back in the day. If you want to not make it onto your flight, just hug a bag of fertilizer before you go to the airport.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
No way. That is wild. Now, okay, so he lasted 2 weeks, and the use of the word therapy is really interesting to me because we have very different definitions. But it's like, what does that do? Because I'm at the point now where like I've been able to associate, and it's probably not good, but like I've been able to associate certain like physiques with death. Like people literally start to look like death. What does that do to the inside of someone's body? Like DNP specifically?
There's really no official answer. I mean, if you go back, again, there's a really great book. You should try and grab yourself a copy. It's called Illegally Thin. Occasionally you'll see a used copy floating around Amazon and what have you. I won't say who it is, but the person wrote it as a pseudonym, a random night. It's actually an industry person, but never mind. And they go through in that book the entire kind of history of DNP. You familiar with the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, I think I've heard of that.
Okay, well, the Nobel Peace Prize was put together by, what was his first name? Edwin Arthur Nobel. Anyway, guy who discovered dynamite, produced dynamite, sold munitions to both sides of the war in World War I, pretty much a big dick. Before he died, he had a moment of enlightenment and donated all his money to giving out goodness prizes, whatever. Well, anyway, in Edwin Nobel's, I think it was Edwin Nobel's munitions factory, people were randomly dying of an hitherto unknown ailment of hyperthermia.
Oh.
And it turns out that hyperthermia was the waste product of trinitrotetranol, TNT. One of the waste products is DNP, and people were collecting it through their skin and literally combusting from the inside out.
And they just didn't have a good side tricep.
Black dude, goofy little spray tan, but nonetheless.
Of all drugs that don't have a use in the human body, is that the one that's the most furthest afield? Just like once dynamite is in the equation, it's certainly not something I'm ingesting.
I mean, I know people that say things like that, and I don't mean to. I'm certainly not saying this to besmirch or offend you, but I find remarks like that a bit high-minded. Like, I don't care what the thing is. I purely care that it will do what I want, and I have enough control to make it do what I want. That's the sum of my moral and ethical way in. I don't like this idea that if it's animal product, I won't eat it. I'm like, I don't understand that. If you're hungry, you eat. Again, it's almost like perfect example. My wife just had a bout of cancer and had chemotherapy. Like, how asinine would it be to put your hands on your hips and be like, I'm not taking poison.
Right.
I'd rather die of this bullshit cancer. Like, that's fucking goofy. You do what you need to do to get the job done. You're making a bargain in all drug use, from fucking sunblock to opioids. You're making a bargain that the effect will be worth the negative effect.
Right.
That's the bargain with all drugs. So why do you have a hard line to be like, all right, but not here?
Right.
I don't fucking buy it.
I don't think I need any more swords in my collection. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's not worth the fertilizer for the sword and the plastic trophy. I could probably just order that on the internet. But
well, I mean, now you're into a separate conversation that I'm very comfortable in engaging. I think bodybuilding is an asinine, ridiculous thing. I mean, I'm not even going to argue with you. I love weight training. I love the involvement of gear. I love physiques, but bodybuilding as a competitive endeavor, it's fucking retarded. It's a pageant.
Well, because this is, I have so many questions. Clear your schedule. From the jump, right? This is where I see a lot of people go wrong, is really in their first, and go wrong. What the fuck do I know? That's why you're here. But like the first cycle, like I've seen so many different paths of development. Like, I don't know if advice, or it's probably going to be a situation. Please.
Can I affectionately interrupt you there? I never want to sound like some kind of fucking self-help guru fucking nutbag, but there's huge value, I think, in what I'm about to say. Language matters, and the way you refer to something ultimately matters in the way you deal with it. When you overly affectionate or overly casual, or you lose the something. You said cycle, then later, the next couple words later, you said path. You're half right. If you grab a dictionary, look up the word cycle, it strongly indicates cyclic, circular, bicycle, roundy. It comes back around. There's a repetitive action. Drug use, there's no gratuitous repetition to drug use. It doesn't need to be a cycle. So right away, I would excise that word and then go with the path that you mentioned and say, how about a course? A course goes from a destination, or from an origin to a destination. which is much more indicative of what you're trying to do with drugs. You are here, you want to be there. Let's plot a course based on obstacles, navigate them. Now all of a sudden, all the words seem to make sense and explain what the fuck you're doing. It lends it a certain weight and legitimacy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
I realize it's a shade over pedantic, but yet that's just who I am, so I can't not be that.
No, I'm about it. I'm a words guy, but I'm definitely not a drug expert. So the fact that you're taking these two worlds together for me, big fan. Is there a common hey, if you're going to start a course, set a path, here's a good entrance way to the trailhead?
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, you go to the doctor with pneumonia, you fucking bronchitis, strep throat, drippy dick, whatever. There's a preformed chart that has, body weight and, race and sex, and you kind of go down and you go, okay, 5 milligrams per kilogram is the standard therapeutic index for that ailment. Those things exist. There, nursing charts, nursing manuals exist. So even though bodybuilding, powerlifting, et cetera, illicit drug use is not a therapeutic concept, it abides by all the same rules. So there is a bell curve of, 89% of the people in the middle of the bell curve need X number of milligrams per kilogram to get a sports performance response. That shouldn't be outrageous to consider that. If you look at the other end of the bell curve, if you went to the doctor with hypogonadism, you would get 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram weekly of an androgen. So it's just a matter of scale.
Is there anything that you shouldn't start with? Is there wow, you're really taking your first run down a triple black diamond rather than just, grabbing your ski poles and going down some blue run?
Again, I don't look at it that way.
Okay.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I understand, everybody, that's how you get the douchebag. Everybody should start with 500 milligrams of testosterone. Well, if everyone should do the same thing, then why the fuck do I have a job?
Right.
If it's as simple as everyone does this, then I'm superfluous. And it turns out I'm fucking not. So that's bullshit. So let's just shelve that dipshittery.
Right. Okay.
It's right tool for the right job. You look at your origin, you stand on a box and spy your fucking destination, and then you choose the best navigational tools to get you there. For most people, it's probably a sprinkle of testosterone and a little bit of a mild anabolic. But for some people, it might metaphorically be fucking dynamite.
Right.
So somewhere there's probably an asshole with a giant, granite wall in their way, and the only tool to get through that is fucking dynamite.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, it's not this. I'm sorry, but I really get offended with this quasi high-mindedness of, well, if you just did things the right way. There's no right way to take illegal drugs.
What about figuring out where your origin is, right?
Well, now you're asking questions that are both useful, interesting, and also fucking painful. You need a measure of honesty now to actually assess where you are. Most people genuinely think they're pretty awesome. Most people are painfully wrong.
Right.
So, being able to figure out where you actually are, what your actual deficiencies are and will be moving down this path, that is kind of one of the things that requires a fucking expert. It's not as simple as it might seem.
Is this like a hematology thing, like blood work, a big part of it, or?
Well, that's certainly a thing. You're starting, phlebotic values. If your hemoglobin's 17, you have less margin than if it's 15, obviously. But there's also, what's your EGFR? What's your, cystatin C? What's your ALT, AST? Bilirubin? What is even immune markers? Neutrophils have some say in this equation. No matter how anabolic you are, if you're fucking sick, you're not getting far. So every single thing, your plasma insulin, A1C, every single triglycerides, every single thing on that chart is going to basically afford you a margin up and down, and not everything has enough margin to do what you want to do.
Now, from that, you would have bioavailability, probably not the right word, but there's documented effects with each drugs that are fairly consistent from person to person. Like, this drug will mess up your triglycerides. This drug will mess up your, and that,
yes.
Do you see a lot of variability in that?
More than people would like, to be honest. Yes. But again, that's the case in all drugs.
Right.
Literally all drugs. Like 99% of the people take 50 milligrams of Benadryl and they get drowsy. 1 in 1,000 gets a spike in blood pressure and pulse and gets a sympathetic response. Contraindicatory effects are a thing. So that's a bell curve, 100%.
Can you, and this, I'm choosing my words very carefully now as this goes on. I'm trying to learn, but like, is there something that you could attribute the recent spike of bodybuilding deaths to? Like, if there's something that you would just be like, look, I think it has to do with X, Y, or Z.
Fuck. I'm happy to answer, but well, actually, that's a lie. I'm not happy. I will answer, but I don't love the edge of the subject matter there, because it gets, in my opinion, it gets into a realm where a certain amount of geopolitical, socio-political nonsense comes into the conversation that muddies the waters. But I think seriously, and I just had a very deep conversation with Dave Crossland from the UK on this very topic. And little did I know, he and I agreed perfectly, almost completely harmoniously on what's going on. And it's a combination, in my opinion, of this basically kind of the standard drug use that has been going on, coupled with the social behavioral changes brought on by lockdowns and COVID, people staying inside, not going outside, less sunlight, less outdoor activity. Even modalities of cardio have changed. So a lot of people felt like they kind of you equated things, but in reality they didn't, because doing that is far more difficult than one would believe. So if you add the ever over time from 1948 till now, the steady systematic escalation of polypharmacy, and then suddenly throw in a vaccine, a wild change in behaviors, all of these things, it just made a perfect storm. And if you plot what happened with the social changes, they line up almost perfectly.
Interesting. Okay, so I like that it was a myriad out. Sorry, please.
I just want to say that do not take from that like I'm like, oh, the vaccine's killing people. I think it's just one of the many just complicit layers. I think the impact of the vaccine is probably positive, and it has that minor phlebitic impact. But if you add that minor phlebitic impact with gobs of anabolics, less outdoor activity, less movement, on and on and on, you add all those things, I think that's your problem.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm remiss to use the word holistic, but I definitely like that holistic approach, because I think it was so easy for people to point to the vaccine as like the primary cause of the spike. And, it's I'm just going to leave that. It's been
just percentage points. All of this stuff is based on a kind of a tipping point concept.
Right.
You have the room for X amount of negative whatever. And then every time you add something, the vaccine adds a couple points. And then the change in behavior, the change in sleep patterns, the DoorDash instead of the trip to the corner, all the things, you add all them up, it just tips the scales, Liber rising to Liber falling, and you slide off the edge of the fucking earth.
It seems as with, and rightfully so, there has been a increase in the undertone of health in bodybuilding in the last couple of years, obviously with, the passing of so many competitors. But there's a phrase that I've heard a lot that I don't necessarily understand, and it's the idea of a health phase. Thank you. Okay. All right. Good. So that's kind of what I was.
I don't want to poke any particular bear with a stick, but there are a number of people running about, kind of yammering about health like it's a fucking commodity. Like you can run down to the corner store and just buy some health, and just sit home and have a little health sandwich, and like a fucking video game, and all your little dials go back to 100%. And that's retarded. It's dumb in a way that's beyond fucking intellect. I have rather quippily said, and I actually realize now that this is probably one of the more valuable things I've ever said, and I just said it as a quip, and that is, I view health as something that you can spend but not earn. I think that it is only a commodity that you can spend. I believe in the Abraham Lincoln concept of every man's born with a full measure of life. How you spend it is your business. And that's it. There's no extra and this is how you get more. That's the end of the conversation.
So because this is something that it's a very pointed question I'm very curious in. It has to do with this vein of thought that there are bodybuilders that have off seasons that seem to have a consistent drug use that is less than what they would take going into a preparation phase, 12, 16 weeks, whatever. I've noticed this health phase be a cessation of the consistent off-season drug use prior to introducing a milieu of new drugs at higher. What is possible in that 4 weeks of cessation of drug use, if anything, or does that make things worse?
Well, I wouldn't say it makes things worse, but, again, what is possible, again, comes down to the details.
Right.
Most of the time, people are taking long-acting depot drugs. You take testosterone enanthate, which is the most garden variety of things. Well, grab a fucking Merck index, God forbid you got to do some chemistry, but grab a fucking Merck index and look up the half-life of an enanthate. Turns out the half-life is something in the 8 to 10 day range. So you have a drug in your body that has a 10-day half-life. Medical termination, or the point at which the drug is diminished to such a level that it won't have any more impact on the physiology, is about 5 times the half-life. So you've got a drug that literally won't stop working for 50 days. So again, now ask me, what's 4 weeks off going to fucking do? Nothing. Right. Mm-hmm. Allow values to go from fucking retardedly high to moderately high, which I guess has some value, but not the one that they're selling you.
Well, I mean, on the flip side of that, I want to just get your opinion on two major things, the bodybuilding side, but also the sports performance side, right? Because rampant drug use in bodybuilding is, and I don't want it to be disparaging, but it is bodybuilding in a sense, right? The sport, there's natural bodybuilding and there's bodybuilding. So there's bodybuilders that you've heard of.
Absolutely not. I disagree with that entirely. There's
really?
No such thing as natural bodybuilding.
Oh, dude.
100%. No, there's fucking skinny, strung out, heroin addict looking motherfuckers, and then there's bodybuilders. I don't believe for a minute that there's such a thing as natural bodybuilding.
Okay. Now, is it possible that natural bodybuilding, as it exists today, would be potentially healthier with the use of drugs?
100%.
Okay.
I mean, again, that has never been, to my knowledge, that has never been done in bodybuilding. But by way of example, that very study was done in Tour de France cycling, and it was concluded pretty robustly that the negatives of drugs are wildly overwhelmed by the positives in terms of anti-catabolism and physiology support. So it's very, very likely that the extreme dieting and what have you of bodybuilding would be offset to a high degree by moderate to even robust drug use.
So that's a good segue, bringing up the Tour de France. Like, everyone that's listening to this has probably listened or watched Icarus, and then watched sort of that the Russian state-sponsored drug scandal. Just as prevalent as drugs are in bodybuilding, what is the relative prevalence in professional sports when it comes to
100%? 100%.
So we're talking
anyone who thinks otherwise is just absolutely fucking delusional. There is rampant drug use in ping pong, fucking billiards, bowling, fucking badminton, chess. I literally, a good friend of mine consults all the time with poker players. There's no sport, and some of these things I shudder to even fucking call a sport. There is no sport that there isn't an avenue for enhancement, and therefore somebody to drive right down the center of that fucking avenue.
There's 4 sports that intrigue me when it comes to drug use. First being combat sports, UFC, and the like. They have, or they at least advocate on the side of stringent testing when it comes to these compounds, right? Like, they have the golden snitch came in, and we're not going to have Alistair Overeem hitting the back double bicep at weigh-ins anymore. Like, we're going to clean the sport up. How is it that they're able to skirt this? What are the paths? Because I think most people will honestly look at this and go, oh, okay, yeah, no, they must be clean because they're testing. That's
retarded. That's like saying our nation's children must be educated because they graduate. Like that's fucking ridiculous. It's the dumbest equative logic I've ever heard. Anyone who's swung by Starbucks and tried to order a coffee and the illiterate fucking nutbag behind the counter, that like it's clearly not working. It's clearly not working.
Nevertheless, people still think that. Because
I see, but that's the thing is I'm not responsible for what people think.
Right.
In my opinion, most people don't think. So
Right.
It just is. It just is. From the beginning, the very tests were designed to be beatable. Like the whole concept was, how do we create a test that looks good on paper, does nothing, and will sap gobs and gobs of fucking money out of the system? That was the purpose. Fucking Bill Goldman wrote a book, who by the way was on the original committee that did that, wrote a fucking book basically saying that. It was a scam from the beginning.
So when people do get caught, that's always what interests me. Is this just a political agenda?
Well, I think there's many, many layers to it, but imagine this. Imagine if you were in charge and you had a scheme in place. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Nobody fails. But you could, and it could be anything, whether in this case it's drug testing, but it could be, taxes. It could be anything. And you could literally just scan the room and go, you failed. Maybe you didn't fail. But the point is, since every single person in that room is complicit, now you have to defend yourself, knowing full well that you and everyone else knows full well you're guilty. What are you going to do? How do you defend when someone takes away your get out of jail free card?
Is it as broadly represented in all sports, or do you think there are some sports that lean heavier into it than others? Like I look at NHL hockey players, and it's like I know a lot of these kids. They're 170 pounds. What's going on?
Well, once again, that's just bad logic. I mean, what did fucking Lance Armstrong weigh? The fucking 7 pounds? Like, I mean, this idea of equating body weight with drug use is just asinine.
Right.
Again, it's drugs do what they do. Will they give you an advantage in that particular compartment of performance in that particular sport? The answer is yes. I suspect that moderate to high amateur level hockey has less drugs than many sports. But again, when you say less drugs, you have to be very careful. Certainly less steroids, yes, but what is the use of THC, opioids, high level of anti-inflammatories? It's a high speed impact sport. You think they're not in pain? They are. Growth hormones gaining prevalence by the day. So again, another interesting fact. Look at the IOC's record book or whatever the fuck you call it. What sport per capita has the highest failure rate in the Olympics?
I have no idea.
Swimming?
Most people don't. Answer's archery.
Shut up.
Really?
Come on. Is it Adderall or something like that?
Cognitive
Or
enhancement?
Beta blockers.
Oh, yeah,
And
that'd do it.
occasionally an anabolic steroid, because again, you have the physical act of pulling the bow, and the stronger you are, to some degree, the less effort it is, therefore the more stable you can be. But in general, one of the highest failures. And then again, that's drug selection. The drugs that happen to improve that particular sport also happen to be a bit more detectable.
And is that an easy throwaway, you think, to save face at the level of the IOC? It's like, hey, let's take Robin Hood, bring him out behind the woodshed.
100%. It's like bullshit advertising products. You can say, well, now 900% more effective. Well, if it was 0% effective now, 900% is the same zero, so you didn't lie. You just changed the fucking label.
Right.
Basically, the IOC and pretty much every other organization on earth uses those same principles. They can literally say there was 3,500 athletes in the Tokyo Olympics and X number failed. We're doing our job, and they're not lying in a sense. That many did fail, and they are doing their job, even if their job is a scam.
Wow. So when I think of greatest athletes, we got like LeBron James, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Who else comes to mind?
Simone Biles is one.
Simone Biles. You're calling bullshit across the board?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And now is this drug use?
You say calling bullshit. I don't see it as bullshit. That's
Right.
like saying,
Right.
super rich billionaire guy lie, cheats, and steals at his business endeavors. I'm like, duh. Like, did you think they didn't? Like,
well, I think it's the bullshit comes from the fact that they're selling themselves as they're not, right?
Well, there's where I don't really get involved because I have absolutely no idea how to navigate fame and fortune. I understand that there's a certain, financial, social connotation that each individual needs to deal with. I don't play into that. But, this idea that, because they pass drug tests, they're somehow drug free. Again, look at Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong took a little over 100 high-level IOC-based drug tests. Lance Armstrong failed 0 of them. I'm not a mathematical wizard, but I believe that comes out to about 0% effective. Yeah. I don't have a degree in applied mathematics, but I'm pretty sure I can work that on a fucking napkin. So, conveniently about 100 drug tests, conveniently about 0 failures. So how effective is it?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Again, now, was he a special case, particularly high intellect, particularly high budget, a lot of things? Yeah, but it's pretty representative of the bigger picture.
Right. Do you ever see like the other side giving up the fight, like from a just a societal perspective, not even a science perspective? Like, do we need to have the cops and robbers? Do we need to have that good guy, bad guy thing? Or will at some point we go like, look, whatever?
That's a social question that I just have no ability to. I got fucking Asperger's. Like I don't fucking know people. I don't know people. There's 0 people in my sphere. I have no idea what the pulse of America is thinking on the fact of drug use. If I had to guesstimate, I would say the same floppy dick liberal douchebags that made these things illegal, aka Joe fucking Biden, now that they're getting geriatric to the point of decrepit, they're probably investigating these things. So maybe we'll see a transition just based on the need of the geriocracy that fucking set the tone for things. But I don't know. I have no idea.
But I'm interested now, because we kind of covered bodybuilding. We went a little bit into sports. What about drug use for like general health, the level of the population? That's not an athlete. That's not trying to be Olympic competitor. I mean, I can go into a 24-hour fitness somewhere in the San Jose area and see over 50% of people have at some point tried an anabolic or androgenic, whatever, performance-enhancing drug or are currently on. And then the other side of that is I also want to get into like the longevity play with drug use of these categories.
Well, first of all, before we even go into that, I would say that right there is pretty much a perfect illustration of my previous point. If you go into bullshit garden variety, 24-hour fitness, and by your less than refined acumen, you can say about 50% of these people are probably using or have used drugs. That's a sample of non-competitive athletes. What do you think the usage is in actual competitive athletes? Right. Like, let's be linear about our thinking here. If people are taking drugs for no reason, what about the people that actually have a reason?
Fair. I like that.
Does that track with you?
That's incredible.
Beautiful.
I don't want to sound like a dick. Well, I realize that I do, but I mean, that's not my goal. I don't set out to be like, well, I'm just going to shit on this guy's ideas. It's just a matter of like, you literally just have to look at that with reasonably open eyes, and it should become horrifically, focused.
Dude, this is why we have, this is amazing. But what is like, maybe let's switch to the longevity play. Like is there a purpose? Like anti-aging is something that's really been hot right now. Like, oh, there goes the eyes, back of the head. He's gonna hang up.
Yeah. You are a chiropractor by trade?
Yeah, I'm a glorified strength coach.
By pedigree? Okay. So you have some measure of medical knowledge. Classically, what is the purpose of drugs? Like I realize you don't, your line of work, like you don't like prescribe drugs. There's not a lot of drugs per se, but if somebody said, what's the role of drugs in your line of work? What would you define it as?
To treat disease?
Okay, fair enough. To treat disease. So you're taking dishealth, adding a drug to try and find some measure of health or equilibrium. Yes?
Let's go with that. Although, based off
Okay.
everything you said so far, I know I'm going to be wrong.
Well, no, I accept that as a completely valid, contiguous thought. So again, using just grade school logic, no high, no letters after your name, no high on mountain speaking to God. You go, well, you have this, you have sick people, you add drugs, you get health. How does that equate to the logic of you take a healthy person, you add drugs, you get more health? Is that's your reasoning? Because it fills a gap. Obviously, if we put more of it in, we'll have what? The idea that taking drugs somehow affords you health is, again, retarded. Health is not a thing. It's not a commodity. You can't buy it. There's no additional health. You have health or you don't have health. There's no you can't have super health. What the fuck is that? You bulletproof? It's retarded.
Right, but
it's insanity.
But when you talked about Joey B, it's like, okay, he might look to things that make him a little less, to slow the decline, right? Like
But that's not health. That's just a fucking lie. Slowing the sarcopenia, reducing muscle atrophy, improving your strength, improving your metabolism, whatever the fuck you want to call, whatever compartment you want to identify. It's drug use. That's a performance enhancement. Even if it's only enhanced to the point where it's retarding a decline rather than creating an escalation, that's performance enhancement. You're not adding health. Health is nature doing its thing on its own. And in real world health, anybody watch National fucking Geographic? The old fucked up animal in the back of the pack with the limp, that's the one that gets eaten. There's no longevity there. It's fucking retarded.
like the prevalence of, and again, I'm just speaking the industry terms, so the people like just I'm the
I understand.
I'm the soundboard for this, but anti-aging clinics that they propagate the use of human growth hormone, testosterone replacement therapy, glucose metabolizing agents, things of the like. What place does that have? Rather than me trying to say what I think the place.
Well, I don't. Not at all for me to say. Again, you go back to the very beginning of my tirade. Drugs erect specific actions. Drugs work. Drugs do things. Right tool for the right job. Like, I have no problem with you coming to me or anyone else and going, I have this problem. This problem is my muscle mass is declining faster than I'd like it. I have this problem. My pecker isn't as powerful as I'd like it. Whatever. You have a problem. We can go through the big book of wonders and find a thing that fixes that problem. But don't call that health. That's a lie. In nature, why do people get lighter, skinnier, smaller, and weaker over time? It's a natural phenomenon. It happens to everyone. Dogs, it happens to dogs. Every creature gets somewhat decrepit, smaller, weaker, and less capable as it ages. The reason for that is everything's aging, including internal organs. Liver, kidney, EGFR, all that stuff is declining. So if the body mass doesn't decline in concert with that, you wind up with an imbalance and you fucking die of a fucking organ failure. So this longevity idea, I'm going to artificially support my muscle mass, so I'm inappropriately muscular in geriatrics. That's not called health or longevity. That's called preserving a capacity or preserving a function, which, again, I don't have a problem with. That's not longevity. The idea that you're going to live longer, no, you might be slightly more effective the time you live, but the idea that you're going to live longer, that's retarded.
Is there nothing, I mean, I'm just asking out of pure curiosity, like is there nothing with a strong link to living longer? Like, I'm not going to be here for a long time. I've accepted that. This is more just like.
Yeah, naps.
Naps?
Yeah, 100%. Look at the research. The people that the least active people tend to be the longest lived.
Interesting.
That's the best drug out there.
Sleep.
Naps.
Yeah, there's I forget who published it. It was a pretty big name. Published a study that there was like some weird Asian population that people sleep 10 hours a night and nap 2 hours a day, and that by and large, as a body of population, it was the longest lived on Earth. And it's because like any other, I make some pretty inappropriate comparisons, but you buy a car and park it in your garage and don't drive it. Turns out the fucker lasts a really long time, but it also did nothing, has no mileage on it, didn't take you anywhere, you didn't see anything, you just sat in your fucking garage. Apparently that applies to humans as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do you recognize trends in like the Whole Foods supplement aisle health thing? Do you recognize those as being as misleading as trends in bodybuilding? Like, where's the good in all this?
Oh, there is none.
There is none. So it's just all a crapshoot.
By my view, I mean, I started lifting weights in 1981, and I've had in my opinion, a sharp eye on things since then. And no, I see no silver lining. It's 100% douchebaggery, front to back, top to bottom.
Have you seen improvements? Do you see like
Oh, no. It's getting as more and more money pervades it, it gets worse and worse.
We're all fucked.
No.
We're all fucked.
Jesus Christ. Okay. I'm almost surprised you asked that.
So you're just in the middle of the black hole with a flashlight.
In 1960, there were 5 people lying to you. Now in 2020, there's 20,000 people lying to you. It's not better, but fuck.
So the state of the health and fitness industry.
Well, are people healthier or fitter? Our lives longer? I mean, give me one statistic that shows things are in a positive trend.
Yeah. Okay, so how's this? If you weren't obviously more in the public face now, but like if you were the president, what would you do?
Well, if I was king of the world, the very first thing I would do is find all the people that wear socks and flip-flops and set them on fire.
That's amazing.
That's a soundbite right there. That's a clip. Marshall, clip it.
Let's see. After that,
priorities. You got to have priorities here.
I would probably round up every employee of the IOC and feed them feet first into a running wood chipper.
I like that.
I bet a lot of them wear socks and sandals too.
Oh, absolutely.
So you got to get 2 birds.
They probably would be. They still be smoldering, but yeah, fuck them. I don't care. After that, I'd really have to sit and think hard. I don't know, but that's where I would start.
Yeah, because it does seem seems abysmal, like the state of things, the way you see it, and it's like I wonder what the fix could be, if any, of just making people less retarded. Because that's a word that came up a lot.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. I think that the bell curve of human intellect and human ignorance is pretty standard. I think it's been the same since we started shacking up in caves. I don't think that's going to change. And the industry now has money in it, and that probably isn't going to change. So honestly, I don't think it's really a savable endeavor in any way. Just survivable. There's a difference.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. For people interested in like procuring your expertise, because there are people that listen to this podcast that, we've had Olympic gold medalists reach out from the podcast. There are real athletes that listen to this. If they're to procure your services, where can they get in contact with you?
Well, I will answer you, but then I'll explain. I can be reached through the Team Evil GSP members, or website rather. The email goes directly to me. There's a Facebook group, which I think is private, but I think you can still access me through there. Instagram, message, what have you, goes straight to me. So I am accessible in terms of you can contact me. Do I have the time, temperament, and fortitude to actually engage? Not usually, but I do it on a case-by-case basis.
Well, we appreciate so much that you took that time, temperament, and fortitude to deal with our bullshit questions for an hour, man. This has been the funniest podcast I think we've ever recorded.
Well, fair enough. I don't know that was my goal, but I'm okay with that. I'll offer some benefit.
No, I appreciate it. Honestly, it's good insight, and it reflects a lot of the answers we give on the topics that we are perhaps more subject matter experts to. And I think it helps knock down it's knocked down some of the thin veils in front of people's thought process when it comes to these substances. And I think the underlying tone was the sort of the risk reward, right? Like, look, this is a thing that does this. It also does this and this. Do you want that more than this, and this? Then just that's the way it should be looked at.
Yeah, I think so. I think talking about language, and here and there I won't say corrected your language, but I inserted language that's more amenable to my way of thinking and my way of doing things. Another little sliver of that, another little linguistic trick that I often apply is do away with the word side effect. Just literally do away with that word. Act like that word doesn't exist. Everything a drug does is an effect. Mm-hmm. Some effects are more prized than others, but there really is no such thing as a side effect. There's just effects. And for instance, what's an effect and what's a side effect is very much a function of perspective. If you, bodybuilder, powerlifter, strength athlete, fitness celebrity X, Y, or Z, takes drostanolone enanthate, Masteron, you're probably taking it as an anabolic. But if your grandmother gets estrogen-dependent breast cancer, she would likely be prescribed Masteron, but not as an anabolic for its other effect, which is a serum-like action at the estrogen receptor in breast tissue. So again, what's one person's effect is another person's side effect and vice versa. So just lose that language.
I love it. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's the concept, the framework around that I think helps streamline a lot of people's thought process, because it is, the pro and con list of drug use is too often how these things are approached, and the nuance really isn't taken into consideration. Yeah, and I really hate to be like, so, people bring me on podcasts, whatever, to talk about drugs or talk about sports, and half the time I wind up speaking about language, but I honestly think that it's most people's weakness. Most people are so linguistically lazy. They're typically intellectually lazy and have no rigor, but without the language for a subject matter, you really have no ability to engage in the subject matter. Right. I mean, imagine trying to talk shop about chiropractic medicine with somebody that doesn't know the name of one bone. Like, how would you have that conversation? Yeah, it's all about having language. What's the quote? The limits of your language is the limits of your world, or something like that. I think that's I forget. Well, I had a university. I've told this story a lot, and I spent a huge amount of money on my education, and I got shamefully little out of it. But 3 or 4 just giant, billboard quality bullet points that have shaped my life. And one of them was actually a biology professor who pointed out to me, and not even in a class, just fucking on a sidewalk, me and a couple other kids, that when you have a thought, he said this. He said, when you have a thought, no matter how silly, you think, hey, I need to get up and take a shit. Those words in some way coalesce in your mind. You think in words. Without the words, it's very hard to have the thought. Right. And so therefore his premise was the width and birth of your knowledge constrains the width and birth of your thoughts. So before you start thinking about high-minded things, you need to have a high-minded capacity of language. And that has wildly impacted the way I do business in everything moving forward. I'm ripping that off because a lot of people think I use too big of words. That's because they're intellectually lazy and linguistically fucking stunted. Even the insults are better with bigger words. Yeah. Right? To be linguistically stunted is such a good one. Yeah. Stunted and loathing are two of my favorite go-to words. The practical common parlance has ruined hatred. Everybody, people hate Nazis and they hate broccoli. I'm like, that they don't. It seems like they should have different words. Like, it seems like they're different orders of magnitude. So I default to loathing. There's certain things that I just loathe, and it seems to add that extra fucking little fucking shot to the groin. It cuts a little deeper. When you can do it in 7 syllables and you leave them confused, and it's like, man, it'd be great. Broderick Chavez word of the day toilet paper. I think that'd be unbelievable. Just like one day it's like the chemical name for a drug, and the next day it's like 17 ways to say you hate something. Yeah. Just you keep that one. That one's free. That one you that's
Yeah,
you go ahead.
there you go.
You go ahead.
I honestly with my particular macabre, I actually see that more as post-it notes.
You wipe your ass with Post-it notes? No, I'm just kidding.
No, just kind of post-it notes with random phrases on them, just so that each day, kind of like word of the day, you peel it up and like, oh, fucking, how about that?
I think that should be like your emergence into the social media sphere. That's your gift you give to the world. The ability to wield language.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I don't know. You wildly overestimate my desire at being part of the world.
Well,
I really have to, emphasize my reluctance to even fucking stick a toe in that particularly torrid pool.
so I think what he said is everyone DM him is what I got. That's what I got out of that. Everyone make sure you like the episode, you tag the episode, you DM. So it's almost like the groundhog. Like he's gonna see a DM and not go on Instagram for 6 more weeks.
I thought he was saying fuck off.
Oh, okay. Well, that's it. Most people usually tell us that. But no, hey, man, I really appreciate you taking the time and coming out. This has been a hell of a lot of fun. If at any point you feel like having a soundboard and entering into this tepid pool of intellectual filth, please let us be your springboard. Please.
Well, I actually have to tell you, the reason I reached out to Rawdon about recording with you was actually something that you actually inspired. I know it's a bordering on douchey thing to say, but on my members group, there's just incessant yammering about RPE and LMNOP and all the fucking alphabet soup of douchebaggery associated with, how awesome your workouts are. And I saw just very randomly, was scrolling through something, I think Instagram, and I saw a soundbite of you talking something to the effect of it shouldn't be thought of as progressive overload, but progressive stimulus. And that was actually the moment that made me realize, like, I probably can talk to that guy.
I'm sorry to disappoint. That's wild. And that's such a tip of the hat to me, man. I really, I was borderline concerned. I'm like, oh no, he thinks something way different. I probably, this is going to be an hour of him just being like, this is why you're wrong. But no, it's funny because our world, we do try and be nuanced, and it's tough when we're bystanders to another one. And I see a lot in the way that the frustration, honestly, is what speaks to me. The frustration you get, the use of the word retarded is like, oh my God, this is what we sound like when we talk about exercise in the current state of things. It's just, flip that into the biochemical, pharmacological world. And so it's like looking into a mirror of like, oh, that's someone else. It's comforting in a way to be like, oh, okay, there's someone else out there that experiences the frustration that comes with the lack of nuance and contextualization of these conversations. And I start to mirror some of the questions I ask. What is the biomechanical counterpoint to this question rather than the biochemical kind? I'm like, oh my God, this would be so frustrating if someone was asking me these stupid fucking questions.
Well, you mentioned, so this person's going to, see things different or have a different position. Honestly, that's, in my opinion, that's what makes science so wonderful, is you are able to find a different position. You are able to pursue a different avenue, arrive at the same place via a different avenue, or arrive at a different place via the same avenue. That's the part I find valuable. People have lost this idea of, for instance, completely off of center, but you hear regularly on the news that the debate on climate change is non-existent. Well, then it's not a science. If you're not able or willing to debate it, if there's zero secondary viewpoints, it's not science. It's fucking religion. Then you just determine who's right by the size of their fucking hat. That's how religion works. The taller the hat, the fucking higher up on the podium you are. So without the opportunity for relevant, intelligent debate, it's just dogma. Yeah. So I embrace different perspectives. As long as you're intelligent enough and articulate enough to support something about your position, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think you're wearing a pretty big hat over there, man, because you're in a really dogmatic field, and people are not only not wearing hats, they're running around with their heads cut off. So that's
fair enough.
To circle back, I do think you're, even if the conversation just leads to more conversation. I think it's fighting the good fight in the industry. And as mentioned, I appreciate you lending a lot of that nuanced perspective. So hopefully, like if one person hears that and goes, oh shit, like my cruise at 750 megs a test might not be the best way to go, I think it's mission accomplished.